On today's show, Tom Wilson in the Capitals with the OT game winner, and Alex Ovechkin is now 10 goals away from passing Gretzky.
You're Locked On Capitals, your daily podcast on the Washington Capitals. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Well, hello and welcome into this edition of Locked On Capitals, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. My name is Dan Holme. I've covered the Capitals for the last 3 seasons for Locked On and various other outlets before that. I'm also the host of the weekly show called The Capitals Minutecast, available wherever you find your podcasts. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. So in this edition of Locked On Capitals, we talk about the Capitals as they are OT winners, taking down the New York Rangers by a score of 3-2. Who was the man that stepped up big time? Tom Wilson helped push the Capitals up over the top. I'll talk about that a bit later. I'll talk about Alex Ovechkin as he is now 10 goals away from passing the great one, Wayne Gretzky, 9 goals away from catching it. Can you believe it? And then in the final segment, I'll talk about the secret sauce for the Capitals, or part of the secret sauce is the chemistry. And as it turns out, the Capitals players themselves are pranksters. How does that factor into the bonding experience between the roster? But just to get it going here, ultimately, I wish the Capitals would have won this in regulation. If you take a look at the game, the Capitals got off to a great start. Pierre-Luc Dubois on the back of the net from a feed from Tom Wilson. I'm thinking, okay, we're in a pretty good spot. Remembering how the Capitals struggled in their previous game and how they had to eke into victory in that one. And then dropping 3 games before that, I'm like, I better not have to talk to everyone about the Capitals losing again, because let's face it, it went to OT, which means it could have definitely gone in the Rangers' favor as well. But that is rather here nor there. What matters at the end of the day is the Capitals, they got the victory. They walked away with a dub instead of an L, and I think it burns especially sweet when the Capitals can take down the Rangers. I think the memories of last season in the playoffs are still very vivid in all the players that participated's minds. And, you know, facing Peter Laviolette and all of that in New York City, just a really big moment. And I think that anytime the Capitals can really stick it to the Rangers, I think they relish those kind of things. So for the Capitals to find a way to win was big. And what really had me engaged with this game more than anything else was the physicality. I love a physical matchup, and that had this. In the game tonight, that was evident as you saw Duhaime drop the mitts, Matt Roy with his first fight dropping the mitts. And then you take a look at Tom Wilson and Rempe getting real close. At the end of the day, I think Rempe's still a little bit scared. But in all things considered, a physical game, certain things that need to get cleaned up. It's the too many men on the ice penalty 11 times this season. Got to do better. And I can tell by looking at Spencer Carberry, it frustrates him to no end that these kind of penalties that are easily avoidable, you can't blame anyone on these ones. Like, oh, you know, it was a trip. Like, hey, that wasn't really a trip or this or that. No, you had too many guys out on the ice, so that they're going to call that all of the time. 9 times out of 10. I think the Rangers got away with one tonight. But all things considered, the Capitals win. Still have some things to clean up. And you take a look at the Rangers, they are a team that is in desperation mode. Listen, the odds of them making it to the playoffs are not impossible, but they are improbable, as there are teams around them that are playing better. So you knew that you were going to get the level best from the New York Rangers, and that is what you got. A team, a fire sale team. They traded their captain at the end of the day, that this team is in a certain level of desperation, shall we say. So let's dive into the game tonight. Again, I'll talk a little bit more about Ovechkin. I'll briefly cover it here in the first segment, but a statement of resilience by the Capitals tonight. Make no mistake about it. Yet another nail biter. I wish they were more decisive victories like, yep, we won 3-2 or 3-1 or whatever the case, not these games where they require overtime and the shootout. I want to win them fair and square more often, but a great evening for Ovechkin. What a performance. Ovi scored his 32nd goal of the season and the 885th of his career, inching ever closer to that historic mark set by Wayne Gretzky, just 10 goals away. 9 to catch him, 10 to pass. It is right there. Like I've talked about before, people are saying that it could be April. I'm here to tell you it could be the latter part of March. I really do believe it. But clutch moments. Tom Wilson, wow, what a player he has turned into. I mean, I always knew it, but I think that he is just really cementing himself as an established elite level player. And you might be saying we already knew that, but next level. This is a milestone high water mark for Tom Wilson, and it continued tonight as well with his second overtime goal of the season. He not only secured the win, but also continued to showcase his clutch ability. There was no grinding the clutch there with Tom Wilson, all killer, no filler. Dylan Strome, who provided the sole assist on that winning goal, set a new career high with his 43rd assist of the season. Another one of those guys, Dylan Strome, a bit of a reclamation project for the Capitals, has turned out to be a true gem. Clutch, yet again, the nice overtime feed, Strome to Wilson, and all money, finding the back of the net. He's been a crucial part of the overtime success, playing a role in 8 of our last 10 overtime goals. So being in the right place at the right time. And, the guy, like I said, that stirs the drink, that has taken his career to the next level. Had that little bit of a blip on the radar, I guess I'm going to say, last season with the Kings, has been nothing short of stellar this season. And I'm talking about PLD himself, scoring his second goal in as many games and demonstrating his two-way game. That there's not a lot of players that want to play against Pierre-Luc Dubois. He is a big, imposing figure. You saw what he did against Connor McDavid before, that he can play that shutdown role. And let's not also forget about Connor McMichael. The second line is the common denominator here, who had an assist, boosting his point total to 5 in just 4 games. But what else worked? The scoring worked. There could have been more scoring, but at the end of the day, I don't want to get into too many negative tributaries here. The Capitals, they walked away victorious, and it was due in large part to strong defense. They executed a stellar penalty kill and blocked an impressive 19 shots. That's how you get it done. And you take a look at it, Charlie Lindgren, coming off that new deal, was outstanding, securing his 14th win of the season and making key saves. Don't call him the backup netminder for the Capitals. He played like a first-rate NHL netminder, and proving his worth. I think that to a certain extent, he can put all of the contract talk away, that chatter that was inevitably rolling around in his head, his internal monologue. Well, he can turn that off as he found a way to make some big saves and helped the Capitals finish in a victory lane. Now, remember, the Rangers only managed 16 shots in regulation, just 2 in overtime. But the extra excitement in the game had some extra excitement with 2 fights featuring Carrick, Duhaime, along with Parsonen and Matt Roy. And Matt Roy, a guy who doesn't have a lot of experience fighting, his fingers were all cut up after the fight. He took that guy and put him down. It was decisive, a strong, a silent leader. I guess you could say that Matt Roy is a guy that likes to live in the shadows, shuns the limelight, but just plays that shutdown role. And as it turns out, knows how to throw down with the best of them. But taking a look at it, quite a game for the Capitals. Again, things they need to clean up here as well as just It's a lot of this, spending too much time in the penalty box. At what time there was 3 Capitals players in the penalty box. That's not going to help your team. But I think that to a certain extent, a bit unavoidable just based on the fact of who they were playing and where they were playing, that we knew it was going to be rowdy. And it was that and then some. Things that I would say that need to be cleaned up is just shutting down the Rangers a little bit more. Taking away those opportunities. You take a look at it. When the Capitals make it to the playoffs, they're going to have to play teams much more difficult than the Rangers right now. So you take a look at the Rangers, definitely on the outside looking in, and the Capitals barely skated away with a victory tonight. So again, to kind of circle back, the things that may have concerned you about the Capitals when they lost 3 in a row, then they won a game, eked their way into victory, and kind of eked their way into victory tonight. Then it was a win. I'm going to take it for what it is. It was a win, but still the things that need to get cleaned up. So as you walk away from this one, Capitals need to play a little bit of a tighter game, trying to shut down the Rangers in this example a little bit more, and maybe a bit more disciplined. I know I said I liked a physical game, but sometimes you have to keep those emotions in check if you're going to have to win games. Of course, my detractors would say it was that physicality that probably pumped the tires of the Capitals, and touche, I agree with that as well. In any event, I'm glad the Capitals found a way to skate away in victory lane. All right, so coming up here after the break, we'll talk about Alex Ovechkin as he is 10 goals away from passing the great one, Wayne Gretzky. I'll discuss straight ahead. When the game tips off, the NBA action is just getting started, and there's no better place to get in on the action than with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. With FanDuel, you can place live bets throughout the game, so even if you miss the opening tip-off or want to bet on a fourth quarter comeback, you can stay in the action, and if you're looking for a bigger payout, you can even combine your live bets in a same game parlay. So get involved in the excitement of the NBA, the Wizards. Take a look at all the excitement that went on between the Mavericks and the Lakers and everything else that's going on. To get a part of the action, even if it's a game you're not normally interested in, open up the FanDuel app, put a little bit of money on the game. All of a sudden, it got that much more exciting. And right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com for your shot at $150 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. All right, welcome back into this edition of Locked On Capitals, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. You can find me over on Twitter. It's at DanCaps218. You can find the show on Twitter. It's at Locked On Caps. So in this segment here, we're talking about the man himself, the great 8, Alex Ovechkin, as he found a goal. He found the back of the net, and it wasn't an empty netter. That's the good thing. I know they all count at the end of the day, but I know it is especially sweet for Alex Ovechkin when he can score them, and it's not an empty net situation. At this point, we'll take him how we can get him, but I think it was especially sweet. And now 9 goals away from catching and 10 away from passing. Can you feel it? Just kind of think to yourself, where are you going to be here? Kind of map it out here a little bit. I'm thinking the end of March, very early part of April here, it's going to happen. Fingers crossed that happens at home, but let's talk about Alex Ovechkin's truly remarkable night. Like I said, his 32nd goal of the season and 885th of his career, inching closer to Gretzky, just 10 away. And the atmosphere, even though they were playing in New York, was electric, especially when the Capitals found themselves trailing at 2-1 in the third period. And at this point, I think the NHL fans in general are rooting for Alex Ovechkin, as they are rooting for a historic moment for the NHL. And if you could be one of the fans in attendance tonight and say, hey, I saw Alex Ovechkin score one of his goals near the time that he is catching and passing Gretzky, I think that would be something now. But as we all know, this team thrives on comebacks, and this game marked their league-leading 20th comeback victory of the season, and a lot of that was due in part to the Great Eight. As Alex Ovechkin goes, so go the Capitals. That held true tonight as well. They ultimately sealed the deal with a 3-2 OT win, and it was thanks to the efforts of Ovechkin and Tom Wilson getting it done. Get her done yet again. And the interesting thing is silencing the critics. You know, I like when these TNT hosts come on and they kind of pontificate, and they got a fact sheet on the Capitals because they threw in some, I'm talking about Charlie Lindgren in particular, his nickname, calling him Chucky Sideburns. You know that they're feeding these guys like little cheat sheets, fact sheets. And I think that they were being a bit clever by calling Alex Ovechkin a one-trick pony because the perception is of him. Well, not the case. Ovechkin silenced those critics by showing just how versatile he can be. After a tough start where the Rangers were stifling our offense, Ovechkin seized a power play opportunity and got us back into the game big time. And his impressive stats, Ovi's been on fire lately, scoring 10 goals in his last 12 games, despite missing 16 games earlier this season due to that injury, that lower leg injury. He's now tied for fourth in the league with 32 goals. The thing that really starts to dawn on you, and it's dawned on me, I'm sure it's dawned on you as well, I've talked about it on the show as well, as had it not been for that leg injury, he would have already caught and passed Gretzky at this point. But it's rather here nor there. Maybe the Capitals wouldn't have played as well. So there's a lot of outside things, but it's the things that you kind of draw into focus that had he not been injured, ostensibly, he would have already caught and passed the great one. It's also worth noting that 16 of those have come in the third period. The man knows how to show up when it counts. And that's one of the things that Alex Ovechkin does very well, is he can answer the bell on the biggest stage in the most clutch moments. And that was one of the moments that you're like, that's why that guy is so good. And I think the Rangers fans in attendance, either in person or on TV, they're like, that is why that guy is so good. That's why he is who he is. He can deliver in key moments, and tonight was no exception. And also, on the show, I talk about all the milestones that he's accomplished between here and there. I know everyone around the NHL and Capitals fans have been fixated on the Gretzky number, but it's all the milestones he's knocking down between here and there that when he takes a look at his trophy case, once he hangs up the skates in the NHL, it is going to be quite stunning. And another thing, he's just 1 point away from hitting the incredible 1,600 point milestone in his career. So let's hear it for Alex Ovechkin. Had he just had one of those accomplishments in his life, that would be something. But all that he has amassed in his historic, legendary career is quite something. And like I've talked about, I feel lucky to be a Capitals fan living in this era that we're not talking about, Gretzky and this old archival footage that looks like it was on a VCR tape or something. Gretzky's held on to that title for quite some time. That I think it's a good thing that Ovechkin is going to be able to take that over. And the thing that I like about it is that he'll have one more season left after this one, so he can just really take that goal total and just really drive it out of the park. So it will be most difficult for the next guy that's going to try to step up and pass him. But as Capitals fans, talking about Ovechkin tonight, yet another goal closer. That's what it's all about. Even in these games that the Capitals don't win, if Ovechkin finds the back of the net, it is still a victory. So it's kind of a double bonus, if you will. The Capitals win the game, and Alex Ovechkin scores another goal. Hence, a bit closer to the great one, Wayne Gretzky. It is a great time to be a Capitals fan. All right, so coming up here after the break, we'll talk about the Capitals as pranksters. Yes, they really kind of give it to each other quite a bit. And we talk about team chemistry and where is it all about? Those positive vibes you hear about from the locker room. I'll break it all down straight ahead. All right, welcome back into this edition of Locked On Capitals, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. The best way that you can help grow the show is to subscribe to Locked On Capitals on YouTube and comment anything down below. So in this segment here, we're talking about the Capitals and that locker room vibe and what is making this team get along so well together. Listen, I heard Chris Patrick talk about it here recently. I've heard different podcasters and bloggers talk about it, that this team chemistry is something that we don't see too often. And there's no cliques within the locker room, for example. Everyone gets along. And, you take a look at some teams, they're divided based on personality or maybe where they're from. This team all gets along. And you got to know in a big way, that is one of the key ingredients to the Capitals' success. And one could say, well, of course, they're all in love with each other, just all happy, getting along, because at many points throughout the season, they've been either tied or the best team in the entire National Hockey League. Would that still be the case had the Capitals been stumbling right now? Say they were outside looking in at the playoff picture. Those are all things to consider when talking about the team chemistry. But let's talk about the team as a bit of pranksters is what we're finding out. We're going to dive into the interesting topic of the playful pranks that keep the atmosphere light and bring the team closer together. And if you've been following the team closely, you know that this year's team really knows how to have fun, from their choreographed pregame handshakes to the quirky player of the game chain. And one of the guys that's noticeably absent this season, of course, is TJ Oshie. And Tom Wilson, or Wilson and TJ Oshie had the pregame hijinks before the game that were second to none. It's definitely a missing aspect, but I think the players that have been brought in, it's not too noticeable. There was just that special bond between Osh and Wilson that kind of transcends many different seasons with the Capitals. But what I'm talking about here is the mischievous nature among the teammates. In a recent episode of the Capitals podcast, The Line Change, players Logan, Thompson, and Aliaksei Protas opened up about their mischievous antics. Thompson himself became a target of his own playful jokes last week when Matt Roy emerged from the locker room, proudly donning a helmet with his name and a smiley face. Tom Wilson as well is a guy that likes to get involved, and sometimes people don't want to talk about Tom Wilson's pranks. I don't know what's ultimately behind that. Tomer's jokes don't get old. Interestingly, Connor McMichael also shared that while Thompson often finds himself on the receiving end of pranks, he's just as likely to instigate them himself. And it's all about having a good sense of humor. I don't know. And a little bit later in the segment, I'll tell you what I'm talking about, is that some of these pranks get pretty serious. And I'm glad that these guys are even-headed enough, level-headed enough to be okay with some of these, because I don't know how I would handle these happening to me on a somewhat regular basis. And he said, Connor McMichael said, quote, "A lot of the guys like messing with LT, Logan Thompson, who spark laughter amongst his teammates. But the blame came. No one wants to really claim responsibility. Thompson didn't admit that he enjoys stirring the pot, but a bit also confessed that he sometimes ends up taking the blame of pranks he didn't commit. So maybe there's something it seems like LT did do. Like that seems like something Logan Thompson would do, but not the case. He pointed the finger at Wilson and Duhaime, suggesting that they're the main instigators behind many of the jokes. And I think it's just to keep the spirits up, to keep it lighthearted, and that is why they get involved. When asked about the biggest pranksters on the team, Thompson didn't hesitate. "It's easy to go to Tom," he said, profiling Wilson as a prime prankster. And let's not forget about Duhaime, two of the tough guys, Tom Wilson and Duhaime on the team, who also has a reputation for both pulling pranks and framing his teammates. Protas chimed in with a laugh. "We've heard stories from Minnesota, right?" unquote. Those are the stories of when Duhaime was a part of the Minnesota Wild and also had Marc-Andre Fleury on his team, and the pranks were, well, let's say, next level. Can you imagine? Fleury took off the tires off Duhaime's car, chained them to a column, and even added a for sale sign on the windshield. Just thinking of that and someone doing that to me or someone I know would make me rather irritated. Could you imagine going out to your car, finding all the tires off, chained to a column with a for sale sign? That's taking it to the next level, but coming from Marc-Andre Fleury, I don't think it should be too surprising. Now, as a Capital, Duhaime continues the tradition of mischief with his new teammates. Memorable prank stories. One memorable incident involved Thompson's attempt at humor in February, where he used the same labeling trick on Wilson's helmet, prompting Wilson to retaliate in a spectacular fashion. Thompson ended up going home with no shirt and no shoes in sub conditions. Very cold out. It was a freezing day. So that's what I'm talking about. It's one-upsmanship, but also trying to keep a level head. Imagine trying to go home and you don't have a shirt and no shoes and it's cold outside. I think that tempers are probably tested and the good nature spirit is probably tested. They set up all his gear to look like Ovi's. Thompson recalled, "I still don't know who it was," talking about some of the crazy tomfoolery, shall we say, that has taken place in the Capitals locker room. So when we talk about the Capitals and what works, those were just some examples from that interview in the Capitals podcast, The Line Change, talking about what is part and what is behind the Capitals' success. Why do they get along so well? Well, it's just having to have a good sense of humor. That, you know, if you go out to your locker and you're missing your shoes and your shirt and you got to go home shirtless without any shoes, you're going to have to be okay with that. Or like the whole Duhaime and Marc-Andre Fleury thing where the tires were missing, chained to a column with a for sale sign. That would definitely test my patience. But at this point, I think, like I say, the overall morale in the Capitals locker room is next level because they're playing so well that it's all about, it's almost like high school pranks. And to a certain extent, it almost seems like an extension of high school or college where you're not home. There's no real responsibilities as much on the road as there is at home. That I think that kind of the youthful nature of these players comes out, shall we say. But at the end of the day, the results, well, they speak for themselves as the Capitals are riding high. Again, despite the outcome of the game, I know they won, shouldn't have made it to the overtime, but it did. They walked away victorious. So if what goes on in the locker room is helping this team win games, then I'm all about it. Let's hope the Capitals can do the things that they need to do. Clean up the play so the games like we've seen here as of late aren't losses, or if they are wins, they don't require overtime because the schedule is going to get more difficult and what is at stake is going to get more difficult. The Capitals need to batten down their mental hatches and prepare for the task at hand. And that task is winning games. All right. Once again, I want to thank you for joining me on this edition of Locked On Capitals, your only daily year-round podcast covering the Washington Capitals. And I want to thank all of you that listen on the audio side and watch this on YouTube. You are what makes this show successful. When you're done here, head on over to Locked On NHL as they have you guys covered 5 days a week, available wherever you find your podcasts and on YouTube. All right. Once again, I want to thank you for joining me on this edition of Locked On Capitals, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. It is your team every day. My name is Dan Holme, and I'll talk to you again next time.